Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today I wanted to make a build video on the dual Torxica. The dual Torxica, if you don't know, are a set of dual pistols that came out with the Coda Lich update. And as for getting these, you do the Coda Lich boss fight, which if you've done them before, you know how this goes. But if not, you do a little boss fight, you get a resource, and you come to this vendor here, which is Eleanor. And then you see this Coda weapons option here. You can click it, and you can take any of these weapons that you want, and they rotate every 3 or 4 days. But this week, we're talking about the dual Torxica. These ones are 30% radiation. The radiation doesn't matter too much. The percentage is what we're after. Mine, I believe, are 45% or 50% or something like that. But with that being covered, let's go ahead and jump into the simulacrum, and I can explain kind of how these weapons work. So these weapons, if you don't know, they have a special gimmick to them, where whenever you get a kill with this weapon, it'll explode spores that'll do cold status effect and increase damage vulnerability. It's a 1.5 times damage vulnerability that is affected on nearby enemies, and you'll be able to tell that it's on them if your cursor changes from your usual circle to a little like infested crosshair, which you can see now, the infested crosshair. But as you can see, these things with the armor shredding do really well, but that was just to show you the crosshair mostly. So I'll go ahead and reset these guys. Alright, now we have those guys all nice and reset. So these weapons, they're pretty powerful, and then you can see the spores get spread to all the nearby enemies, and our crosshair will be normal, like this guy who doesn't have them, and then all red and infested on the guys who do. And then you get your damage buff comparatively, and it's 1.5 times, so it's like pretty noticeable of a buff. It's essentially a free Bane mod, if it functions how I think it does. But since these things dropped, they have been my favorite secondaries in the entire game to use. And I was using the dual Torxica with the Incarnon, but I like these a lot more because I don't have to worry about an Incarnon, and they're just as powerful. They don't do the giant AoE headshot stuff like the dual Toxicists do, but I love not having to worry about an Incarnon, and these things have 190 rounds in the magazine. But aside from the cold proc, or the cold spreading and doing the damage vulnerability, there's not too much crazy special with these weapons, other than that they just kind of look gross, because they are a pretty gross looking weapon. But with that covered for these weapons, we can go ahead and jump into Steel Path, and I can show you how they work in actual missions. Alrighty, now we are here in the Steel Path, and I'm using these weapons on Frost. I didn't mention before, but I'm using them on Frost, 1 because of the cold damage, but 2 because I'm using Biting Frost, so I feel like it'd be a really good synergy for Frost specifically. Let's go ahead and get some Overguard going, and a little armor stripping. But I've been using these things on Kome, anyone who does Frost damage, really. And the ice that comes from the special effect of this weapon does work for Kome's challenges, or for decrease. But these have been my favorite secondaries since they've released. I got them pretty much week 1, I want to say, because they were in rotation at the beginning, and man, they're great. If you're looking for a really reliable secondary that you don't have to mess around with Incarnons and just get raw output, these are the ones for you. The only thing I will say that's like kind of a negative for these weapons, and I think it's just a bug that'll get fixed eventually, or it'll become a feature. Sometimes when you shoot them, they fly in the air like that, and the enemies will float for some reason. I'm not 100% sure why they do that, but they do float sometimes when you shoot them, so it is a little weird shooting down corridors and then seeing enemies fly up onto the ceiling like that. I assume it's something to do with the spores landing on the enemies, causing them to do that. But these weapons are great. They're just straightforward weapons, so this video won't be too crazy long, because there's not a whole lot to talk about with these. They're just solid, reliable weapons. Let me know what things you guys want to see in Warframe, by the way, because I have my list of videos, but let me know what you guys want to see, because I have a pretty sizable list of stuff I want to do, whether it's frames or weapons. I'll be doing all the Coda weapons eventually. The ones I have lined up right now are the Base Assist, the Synapse, Motovore, and Sporothrix, and I think they're... oh, and the Path Assist, the Glaive. I have all those already ready to go for videos, and then once they're all done, I'll probably put them all together in one big long video, so you can just kind of chain back to back watch them if you don't want to go look for individual videos. because I probably won't release them back to back, but all of the Coda weapons will be covered. I have them all built and ready to go. It's just a matter of timing them. But these pistols are, they're great. These have been my favorite since they come out. And as you can see, I'm using them on Frost because we can get all the crits and stuff. And I believe I'm using secondary Enervate on these for the big crits, if I'm remembering the arcane correctly. But I have that maxed out. You don't need it for this to do really well. They just enhance the build once you do have it. Let's go ahead and grab some life support so that I don't fail my mission. There we go. There's a Guzzling over there. I'll go take him out too. Oh, Guzzling. Get a little ice on him. But these things with Galvanized mods are pretty strong. I used to use the dual Toxicas, or dual Toxicist, that's the one, as my main secondary, but I was never really, like, a huge fan of the non-Incarnate version, because, for me at least, they just have a ton of kick, or, recoil, and I know they have, like, mods and things that you can throw in your Exilis slot to fix the recoil issues, but I don't want to... And the Necromech's on the ceiling. I don't want to go messing around with Exilis mods all the time just to make a weapon feel better. Because I do think they are probably better than this, just because of being an Incarnate and being kind of crazy, but this weapon is by far my favorite secondary. Prior to getting these, I was just using the Latum all the time, that and the dual Toxicist whenever I remembered I had them. But I was mostly using Latum since I did Angels of Zariman questline. Which, I don't know if I've done a video on that, but my Latum's not exactly fully built. It's like 95% done, I've just never gone and finished it. But these things are pretty nice. I have a magnetic mod on here as well, so that I can just chew through Overguard really easily. Because a lot of the weapons from 1999 seem to have issues getting through Overguard. So I've been running one magnetic mod on a couple of my weapons. The other one being the EF5 Jupiter. I threw a magnetic on there as well just to help it get through some Overguard easier. You don't need the magnetic, but I really like being able to just chew through Overguard instead of getting walled off by Eximus and having to shoot him for 6 months before I actually take him out. But that was our little field test, if you want to call it, for the dual Torxica. We can go ahead and jump into the build section of the video now. Alright, now we are back in the back rooms, and I can show you my build for the dual Torxica. So I only have one build, because I've only really had to use one build. So mine are 44% heat valence, which if you don't know what this is just like your progenitor bonus. And then I'm running a corrosive heat on here so that I can get through armor, and heat damage is really nice to have. And then we have magnetic to chew through Overguard. So for our build, we have secondary Innervate, which increases our crit chance by 10%, and it'll reset after 6 big crits, which I believe are orange or red crits. I cannot remember which one off the top of my head. And then I talked about the unique trait earlier, but we have Galvanized Shot giving a status chance on kill, and then we get direct damage per status type affecting the target. We have Galvanized Diffusion, gives us multi-shot, and then it'll stack up as we get more kills. Lethal Torrent gives us fire rate and more multi-shot. Target Cracker for some crit damage. Jolt for electricity and status chance. Pistol Pestilence for toxin and status chance, giving us our corrosive. Heated Charge for some heat damage, and then we have Magnetic Might for mostly the magnetic, but the crit damage is also nice too, which puts us at a nice 4.8 times crit multiplier, and we have our 80% status chance. And our crit chance is kind of low, so you could probably run a crit setup on this, but I really like leaning into the statuses with it doing the cold, and then we have the heat, puncture, corrosive, magnetic, and heat. And then we have the Innervate for even more crits, so this will stack up until we get our 6 big crits. But I really only have one build. Exilis slots, kind of whatever. You can put whatever you want to here. I don't really have any mods that I feel fit nicely, because I don't really have any issues with this weapon that the Exilis mods would fix. And I will say there is no budget for this weapon at all, because this weapon, if I'm remembering right, is MR17. So you couldn't really get this weapon until you're in the end of the game anyways. So by then you'll have good mods and things like that. But if you don't have galvanized diffusion, you could probably get by with just regular barrel diffusion. Lethal torrent, I would just go for fire rate. Magnetic might you get at the end of the game, otherwise you wouldn't have this and you could put whatever you want here. Pistol pestilence, you would just do toxin, and jolt, you would just do electricity. Galvanized shot, I would say just throw regular shot on, but they function differently, whereas normal shot is just status chance. This one gives us the direct damage per status type affecting the target, kind of like a condition overload type of thing for guns. So I would say throw this on, but they function differently, so you will lose the damage of this if you don't have this mod, and this is the main one that we're kind of leaning on for our damage. With that being covered, that is the dual Torxica. For fashion, nothing too crazy, just black, white, blue. But that is the dual Torxica, and I paired it with Frost because he has the Biting Frost, which gives 200% crit chance and crit damage against frozen enemies. And these pistols do in fact freeze enemies when they do their spore explosions, along with his abilities. So, really good synergy there. Any frame that does cold damage, really, you could pair it with Gauss Thermal Sunder. Anyone who does cold damage will do well with these weapons. And even if they don't, they'll still do well with these weapons, because these things are great. But, thank you guys for tuning into the video. Nonetheless, consider subscribing to the channel, because I would love to hit 1,000 subscribers. That would be awesome. But, like I said, thank you for tuning in. Let me know what you guys want to see down in the comments below. And I will see you guys in the next video.